My wife cheated with 10 men on dating apps and secretly planned our divorce. But during a family weekend, I connected my laptop to the TV and exposed every message, every profile, and her new life plan in front of everyone. I'm 34 years old. I'm a mechanical engineer, and I never thought I'd end up telling this story, but here we are. What happened a few months ago basically destroyed my 6-year marriage and made me rethink absolutely everything I thought I knew about the person I was sharing my life with. I guess I should start at the beginning, or well, at the moment when everything started to fall apart, although the signs were probably there much earlier, and I just didn't want to see them. I met Victoria when we were like 26, at one of those mutual friend parties where everyone ends up drunk playing beer pong, you know the type. She was incredibly gorgeous, with that style of girl who knows exactly how to look good without seeming like she's trying too hard. And honestly, I was surprised when she started flirting with me, because I was never the kind of guy that women chase. We got married 2 years later, and for a while things were good, or at least I thought they were good. I worked a ton, like those jobs where you get home at 7 or 8 at night, and Victoria had part-time jobs here and there, nothing very stable. But I never pressured her much about it because I made enough for both of us and, I don't know, I guess I liked the idea of being the provider or something like that. The problem, and looking back, I should have seen this coming for years, is that Victoria had this friend, Crystal, who was basically pure poison for our marriage. Crystal was one of those people who's always talking about how men have to earn it and how women deserve this and that. And don't get me wrong, I have no problem with women having high standards. But Crystal specifically seemed to believe that a man's only value was how much money he could spend on his woman. And Victoria, well, Victoria started spending more and more time with Crystal, going out to lunch or coffee or whatever, and I started to notice that when she came back from those meetings, she was always in a bad mood or looked at me with this weird expression like evaluating me or something. Everything exploded one night about 8 months ago. I had come home early, like 5 in the afternoon because I had finished a big project and my boss let us leave early. And when I opened the door, I heard voices in the living room. Victoria was there with Crystal and 2 other friends, and obviously they didn't know I had arrived because the music was loud and they were laughing about something. I stood there in the entrance, taking off my shoes, and then I heard Victoria say something that literally froze me in place. She said, and I swear these were her exact words, "If I could upgrade Nathan, it would be perfect. Like same job, but with better physique and more ambition. You know what I mean?" And Crystal laughed and said something like, "Girl, you need to get out there and see what else is available. You don't have to settle." And Victoria responded, I know, but it's complicated, like he pays for everything and it would be a mess to get out of here. You know that feeling when you feel like the floor disappears under your feet? That was exactly it. I stood there in the hallway with my shoes in my hand, feeling like I'd been punched in the stomach. I waited a few seconds, took a deep breath, and then walked into the living room like nothing happened. Victoria startled a bit when she saw me, but quickly put on that smile she always used, that smile that I now realize was completely fake. I asked her if we could talk in private, and she rolled her eyes but followed me to the bedroom. I told her directly what I had heard, and she, instead of apologizing or trying to explain, just shrugged and said it was just girl talk, that it didn't mean anything, that I was overreacting like always. She told me I was insecure for reacting like that to a private conversation between friends. And the thing is, God help me, I believed her, or wanted to believe her. I convinced myself that maybe I was being paranoid, but after that I started noticing things. Victoria was constantly on her phone, like obsessively, and when I walked into the room she'd flip it face down or put it away. She started going out more frequently, always with Crystal or other friends, and when I asked for details about where she'd been, she'd get defensive. She started dressing up more, like more makeup, more revealing clothes, and when I told her she looked pretty, she'd look at me with this annoyed expression, like my opinion didn't matter or something. She also started spending more time at the gym, which in itself isn't bad, obviously, but combined with everything else, it made me feel increasingly uncomfortable. Things got really ugly when my best friend Marcus called me on a Tuesday night. Marcus and I have known each other since college. He's one of those friends who tells you the truth, even when it hurts. You know? He told me he needed to talk to me in person, and we met at a bar near his office. When I arrived, Marcus looked uncomfortable, like nervous, and that already put me on alert because he's never like that. He said, "Brother, I don't know how to tell you this, but I saw Victoria yesterday at that expensive Italian restaurant downtown. You know which one? And she was with a guy. And when I say with a guy, I mean they were at a table for two. She was all dressed up, and they were laughing and touching hands." Marcus showed me a photo he had taken with his phone, a kind of blurry photo from far away, but there was Victoria, definitely her, with a guy I didn't know. A guy in a suit who looked like an executive or something. I felt like someone had thrown a bucket of ice water on me. I asked Marcus if he was sure it was her. Stupid question because obviously it was her, and he just nodded and put his hand on my shoulder. I went home that night and Victoria was in the living room watching TV. I asked her how her day had been and she said boring, that she'd been home all day cleaning. Direct lie. I asked her if she'd gone out at any point and she said no, she'd only gone to the supermarket in the morning. Another lie. At that moment, I knew. I had to find out what was really going on. During the following weeks, I basically became a detective, and I'm not proud of it, but I don't regret it either. I started paying attention to everything. I noticed that Victoria always took her phone to the bathroom. Even to the shower, she'd leave it on the sink with music playing. I noticed there were charges on our shared credit card from restaurants and places we'd never been to together. I noticed she'd come home with that expression of someone who just had a good day, but when she saw me, the expression would disappear immediately. The opportunity I was waiting for came on a Saturday, when Victoria went out to lunch with her sister. Or so she said. She had left her laptop at home, the one she used to look up recipes and watch series, and I knew she never put a password on it because she said it was too complicated to remember. I opened the laptop with my hands shaking, literally shaking like I was cold even though it was hot in the house. First, I checked the browser history and found she'd been searching for things like how to know if your marriage has no future, and signs you deserve something better, and how to prepare financially for a divorce. But that wasn't the worst part. I went into her email, and it was all there. She had active profiles on 3 different dating apps, like Tinder, Bumble, and another one I didn't even know. The photos she used were recent. Some I recognized from our last vacation, where I didn't even appear. She had cropped me out. And the messages. God, the messages. She was talking to at least 10 different guys, and they weren't innocent conversations. She was telling them she was in the process of getting divorced, that her marriage had been a mistake, that she was looking for someone with more ambition and better financial situation. There was one guy in particular, some Brandon who worked in finance, with whom the conversation was especially intense. They had met at least 3 times, according to the messages, and she had told him that I was a boring husband who didn't appreciate her, that she had gotten married too young, and now realized she wanted more from life. Brandon would respond, saying she deserved someone who would treat her like a queen, that he could give her the lifestyle she deserved, all that crap. And Victoria ate up all that story, responding with heart emojis and telling him she couldn't wait to see him again. I literally felt like my heart was being ripped out of my chest. This was the woman I had married, the woman I had promised everything to, the woman I worked 60 hours a week for so we could have a good life. But wait, because it gets worse. I found a folder in her documents called New Life Planning, and when I opened it, it was basically a manual on how to get out of our marriage. It had a list of divorce lawyers she had researched, an estimate of how much she could receive in a divorce settlement based on my income, a list of apartments she'd been looking at, and what really killed me, a literal list of characteristics she was looking for in her next husband. The list said things like income over $150K annually, physically fit, adventurous, willing to travel frequently, not wanting kids immediately. It was like I was a defective product. She was planning to return to the store, and she was making a shopping list to find the perfect replacement. I took screenshots of absolutely everything. Every dating profile, every message, every photo, the planning folder, everything. I saved them to my personal email and on a USB drive that I hid in my office. I closed the laptop and sat on the couch feeling completely empty. Part of me wanted to wait for her to arrive and confront her right there, yell at her, ask her how she could do this to me. But another part of me knew I had to be smart. If she was planning the divorce so carefully, I needed a plan too. The following Monday, I called a lawyer that a work colleague had recommended once, a guy named Lawrence who was supposedly really good in divorce cases. Lawrence listened to me tell the whole story, saw all the screenshots, and leaned back in his chair with this serious expression. He told me the good news was that I had solid evidence of infidelity and bad faith, which could help me in the divorce. The bad news was that Victoria probably had a right to some money anyway, because we'd been married more than 5 years and she didn't have significant income. He explained my options and basically told me I had 2 paths. 1, start the divorce process immediately, or 2, prepare myself first and do it in a way that would protect me financially as much as possible. I decided to go with option 2. Lawrence advised me to open a separate bank account and start diverting part of my salary there to document all the household expenses I paid for, and basically prepare myself for what was coming. He also suggested I stop doing certain things I always did, like household chores and home maintenance, to demonstrate how much I contributed to the marriage beyond money. During the following weeks, I followed his advice. I opened an account at another bank and started transferring money there. I stopped cooking, cleaning, taking care of the yard, fixing things that broke. Victoria noticed the change and asked me what was wrong, and I just told her I was tired from work. The tension in the house was unbearable. Victoria kept going out constantly. I kept pretending nothing was happening, and we were both basically living like roommates who hate each other but are stuck in the same apartment. It went on like that for about 2 months. 2 months of this horrible farce, until one day Victoria came home with this huge smile on her face. She told me she'd had a brilliant idea, that we should do a weekend with friends at that lake house her cousin Emma had, like a couple's retreat to reconnect. She invited me, and she was also going to invite her friend Megan and her husband Colin, Kristen and her husband Keith, and another couple of friends, Philip and his girlfriend. In total, we'd be like 5 couples. My first reaction was to say no, but then something in my brain clicked. This could be the perfect opportunity. If Victoria wanted a weekend with friends, I'd give her a weekend she'd never forget. I told her yes, that it seemed like a good idea, and she was a bit surprised by my enthusiasm but looked happy. I called Lawrence and told him about the plan forming in my head, and he laughed and said, "Nathan, this is risky, but it could work. Just make sure you have the papers ready." Lawrence prepared the divorce documents during the following week, and I took them to the office, reviewed them, signed where I needed to sign, and kept them in a briefcase I planned to take to the SBI lake. The weekend arrived, and we all met at the lake house on a Friday afternoon. It was one of those nice houses with a private dock and big living room with fireplace, like the perfect place for one of those Instagram photos Victoria loved. That night we all cooked together, drank wine, played board games, and I acted like I was the happiest husband in the world. Victoria looked relaxed and happy, probably thinking this weekend would mark a new beginning or something, or maybe she was just enjoying time with friends before officially leaving me. I don't know. Saturday morning, some people went swimming in the lake, others did kayaking, and I offered to make breakfast for everyone. During the day, I kept being super nice and attentive to Victoria, which had her a bit confused because I hadn't been like that in months. That night, after dinner, we were all in the living room having more wine, and someone suggested watching vacation photos on the big TV that was there. Perfect. I told them I had some great photos on my laptop and that I'd connect it to the TV. I brought my laptop, connected it to the TV with the HDMI cable, and told them I had to find the photos. Give me a second. Then, instead of vacation photos, I put up the first screenshot. It was Victoria's profile on Tinder, with her photos and her description that said, "Newly single and ready for new adventures." The silence in the room was instant and absolute. Victoria turned pale, completely pale, and tried to get up from the couch, but I was already moving to the next image. I showed her Bumble profile, then her profile on the other app, then I started showing the messages with Brandon and other guys. Victoria was screaming, like literally screaming, saying to turn it off. How dare I? But I kept going. I showed the messages where she told these guys that I was a failure, that our marriage had been a mistake, that she deserved something better. Then I showed the new life planning folder with her list of next husband characteristics and her divorce strategy. Everyone in the room was in complete shock, like nobody was moving. Nobody was talking except Victoria, who kept screaming. Megan had her hand over her mouth. Kristen looked like she was going to cry. The husbands just looked at me with this expression of total horror and discomfort. I let them process everything for a few seconds, turned off the presentation, disconnected my laptop, and then took out the briefcase I had brought. I opened the briefcase and took out the divorce papers. I walked up to Victoria, who was now crying and trying to explain herself, saying I didn't understand, that things were out of context, and I handed her the papers. I said, loud and clear so everyone could hear, "Victoria, here are the divorce papers you were planning to ask me for anyway. I'm saving you the work. They're already signed on my end. You just need to sign them and this is over." She took the papers with her hands shaking, looking at them like she couldn't believe what was happening, and I simply turned to everyone else and said, "Sorry to ruin the weekend, but I thought everyone should know what kind of person Victoria really is before she told them her twisted version of events." I took my things, got in my car, and left. During the whole drive back to the city, like 2 hours of driving, I felt this strange mix of relief and absolute sadness. I had ended the farce, I had exposed the truth, but I had also publicly destroyed the person I once loved in front of all our friends. Part of me felt like the worst human being on the planet, but another part knew she had planned to do exactly the same thing to me, just in a way that would leave me looking like the bad guy. The following days were chaos. Victoria called me like 50 times, sent me hundreds of messages, alternating between begging me to talk and insulting me in every possible way. Crystal, her poison friend, also sent me messages saying I was an abuser for humiliating Victoria like that. But I also started receiving messages from other people. Megan wrote me, apologizing for not having seen the signs before and telling me that she and Colin were on my side. Kristen sent me a long message explaining that Victoria had lied to her about many things for months, and that she felt betrayed too. Philip called me and said what I did was brutal, but Victoria probably deserved it. Marcus, my best friend, took me to dinner and told me he was proud of me for having the courage to do what I did. Victoria's family was another issue. Her mom called me hysterical, saying how could I do this to her daughter, but her dad called me later and told me quietly that he was disappointed in Victoria, that he had considered me a good man and a good husband, and that he was sorry things had ended this way. Her sister Kay blocked me everywhere, but her cousin Emma, the owner of the lake house, wrote me a message saying she couldn't believe what Victoria had done and that I had all her support. The family basically split. Some defending Victoria saying I had publicly humiliated her, others recognizing that she had caused all this with her actions. The divorce process moved surprisingly fast. Victoria signed the papers after 2 weeks, probably because she knew I had all the evidence against her and that fighting would only make everything more public and ugly. Lawrence negotiated a settlement where she received some money. Not as much as she had planned, according to her document, but enough to establish herself on her own. She had to move to her cousin Emma's apartment, and according to mutual friends, things weren't going very well for her. Apparently Brandon, the finance guy she had so much chemistry with, completely disappeared when he found out about all the drama. The other guys from the apps also stopped responding to her. Crystal, her great friend and confidant, also distanced herself after her own boyfriend left her when he found out about the role she had played in encouraging Victoria. I focused on rebuilding my life. I reduced my work hours to something more reasonable, started going to the gym regularly, took up hobbies I had abandoned during the marriage. About 4 months after the lake incident, I met someone at the gym, a woman named Sarah who works as a nurse and has this calm, genuine energy that reminded me what it feels like to be with someone who really appreciates you. We're not in anything serious yet, like we've only gone out a few times, but it's nice to feel like there's life after all this mess. Last week, Victoria sent me a message, the first in months, saying she needed to talk to me, that there were things she wanted to explain, that she never had the chance to give me her side of the story. I didn't respond. Not because I'm cruel or because I want to punish her forever, but because honestly there's nothing left to say. She made her choices. I made mine. And now we both have to live with the consequences. Sometimes, I wonder if I did the right thing exposing everything so publicly, if I should have handled it more privately and maturely. But then I remember the planning folder, the messages where she described me as an obstacle on her path to a better life, and I realized she never intended to treat me with respect or dignity. She was just waiting for the right moment to leave me in the way that was most convenient for her. I just got ahead of her and did it in the way that was convenient for me. I don't know if that makes me better or worse than her. But at least now I can sleep at night knowing the farce is over, and I can start building something real with someone who actually wants to be with me.